All right, welcome back to AM Live. So, also on the front page of the Standard, it is 4,000 shillings for a bag of maize, state declares, and Kindiki, Haiti deployment to go on as planned. Interior CS has said the plan to send police officers to Haiti will continue and that another advance team is heading to the country in the next few days. This in spite of a court order. Your thoughts on the Haiti situation? Jim, the CS said these are police are not guinea pigs. And he went on to detail that they are part of the support forces in Somalia, in South Sudan, I believe he said. He says they were in Yugoslavia when it was during the Baltic War. He said they were also in Namibia in the 80s, I believe, the transition. Anyway, yeah, so he says, you know, they're not novices, essentially. Has it bolstered your confidence?
So on this, I side with the decision, and the reason being, one, we're part of a global community, and one, as a Pan-Africanist, the Haiti situation is one of great concern to our brothers and sisters in that part of the Caribbean. And when they asked for help, because they wrote to the United Nations and said, the government wrote to the United Nations and said, we need your help. This is getting out of hand. And the United Nations needed someone who would lead that mission. And Kenya offered itself to lead that mission for whatever reason. If it is part of our new foreign policy, as I keep saying, we're not sure of what the foreign policy of this government is. But if part of our new foreign policy is to really establish contact with the Caribbean nations and reach out to them and things like that, then that's fine. But we cannot, in this time, because like I said, we have been part of different missions. I mean, our forces are in Somalia, for crying out loud. We're in the DRC right now for peacekeeping missions there.
But then those would argue those who are carrying the water in those instances is the military, and you cannot compare the two.
But they're still our security agencies, right? We have different security agencies. We have the military, and we have the police. And the Kenyan government reserves the right to then decide. Obviously, the contested issue is whether our police have the right to go into a foreign, because ideally that's usually the work of the military. But you see, the issue within Haiti is not that they are dealing with insurgents. You're dealing with your criminal. They're not petty thieves like the ones we have here, but you're dealing with criminals who are still citizens, and you need their rights respected. And so we, as members of the global community, have a responsibility ultimately, because one day we might be in that situation and we might seek for help. And so sending our officers to be part of a larger force and leading that mission.
But in a leadership role, though.
Exactly, we're taking a leadership, because someone has to lead ultimately. What's wrong? What Kenyans can't think of themselves as leaders in the global community?
No, we are just asking. We are just asking.
I think for once, we need to see ourselves as potentially, because we are thinking, why isn't other countries taking lead? Why is it Kenya taking lead? What's wrong with Kenya taking lead?
Okay.
In fact, that should be a feather in our cap, that we actually took lead in restoring security in one part of the world. We've had numerous generals in this country who've gone to the Sudan, Liberia, and led successful peace missions, and they are celebrated world over. We don't celebrate them as well. Okay. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to contribute to peace in that part of the world. Of course, the other argument is that we have our own internal issues with the bandits, and that why are we sending police officers out there when we have our own internal issues with bandits? We have our own internal issues here, and we are solving them.
He stated we were requested, I think, for a force of 2,500. Yeah. We said we'd commit 1,000. Nudin Hagai.
You know, I look at this thing from a different perspective. This is not the first mission in Haiti. You know, there was one that was called the MINUSTA mission that was led by the UN. And that mission had a lot of problems. Among them were sexual offenses against women and girls. There were issues of cholera, where it was said that by the citizens of Haiti, that the mission, those who were in the mission opened up the sewer and contaminated the water that led 9,000 Haitians to die and 800,000 were sick. So they went to the road and said, these people have to leave our country. So my question is, as we are going there committing 1,000 officers from our country, whose bidding are we doing? Is it our own bidding, or are we acting to someone's direction? Because you have to realize, we need to, one problem I have with this thing is there's a lot of mystery and there's a lot of silence on the terms of reference. We don't understand, we don't know what the bigger goal is, for example. All we know, there are two things. There is some political mileage that will be gained, or rather will be seen, courtesy of what he's saying, position ourselves as leaders. The other thing is that there's the financial incentive that is meant to come. Now the question is, this incentive, will it better the lives of those who are going there, or who is going to gain? Now, the issue I have is that the resolution from the council is that we're supposed to have a rapid vetting against misconduct. Now look at our police service. We have issues of misconduct that have been dealt to date. So they're saying officers who are going there have to have a rapid vetting. All we know is that whether that vetting is happening or not, we don't know. All we know is that every OCS is given 2 names from a police station. Are they doing that vetting to protect issues of misconduct? So when they go there, we don't have an issue where the people from that country turn against us. Because, you know, it's us, Jamaica, Antigua, I think Spain as well. And some,
Rwanda?
Yeah. We're like, I think 7, if I'm not wrong, 7 countries. So my question is, who's bidding are we doing? That's number 1. Number 2, we offered ourselves in July. We said we're going to leave that mission. So as a country, Article 35 comes in, access to information. So we want to know terms of reference that are there. And number 2...
But in terms of what? Because they have said, listening to the president's statement, he said these are our brothers. So we're going in out of a moral responsibility.
You see,
so what is not clear?
You see, this is the thing. Everything that the government does, we're a sovereign country. Unless we are not sovereign, that's why I'm saying there's a bidding force away from us. Unless we're not sovereign and we are doing someone else's bidding, that means we'll just be told, pack up and leave. My question is, and that is where there's a court case. You know, when you want to deploy, for example, the army, you seek approval from Parliament, right?
Yes.
Now, the issue on the police as well, Kenyans must have a say as well.
Yes, actually, he did state that we would abide by Article 240, but it's like it's a foregone conclusion. Do you get what I mean?
And that is my problem, because now we're being told, court order or not, the deployment is unstoppable. That means there is a force behind it. Now, people are talking about how the leadership in Haiti requested for support. You have to understand one thing. The so-called leadership is unelected leadership. The people there...
I think it was the broader Caribbean leadership.
The people there have an issue with the leadership that is there. The civil rights groups, they are saying, once the deployment is done, it will be more or less like making the leadership, giving some credibility. And that is one of the issues that they have there as well.
All right, so before Angel and Kidi accuse me of forgetting them on this side, Angel, your thoughts?
Olive, I have no doubt about our armed forces, wherever they go in the world, but we need to look at the context at which we are placing them. And I'd like to agree that the people of Haiti are fighting for their independence. The leadership there is, of course, unpopular. And when we call the people of Haiti who are fighting for their nation as rebels, I think is a disservice. I think those are the Mau Mau of their time. And sending troops there is not... it's not, there's nothing Pan-Africanist about it. When they wrote to the UN Security Council and asking for support, and Americans, looked around and asked themselves, who are our best allies? Let's ask Kenya to support us. There's nothing wrong with that kind of bilateral relationship. But when we look at, Kenya is looking at that request from a friend, and a friend in need is a friend indeed. And that is what Kenya wants to fulfill. But then what I see is looking even at America, even when they were sending their troops to the Afghanistan war, most of the Americans had a lot of problem with that, because most of their sons, their uncles, their brothers came back in caskets. And up to today, Americans have not forgiven their government for doing that. So that's why America is thinking we cannot take our people to that kind of space that we've been before, so let's ask one of our friends to do that. In any case, a lot of allocations in the millions of dollars are allocated to Kenya in terms of various things, from capacity building programs to enhancing national security. But really looking inward is something that we need to ask ourselves as a nation. What are we gaining from this process? Because in the foreign policy space, it's all about you scratch my back, I scratch your back. There is nothing wrong with that. as a country, I would want to see how how the Kenyan Parliament debates this matter when it's presented before them, and see exactly, because these are our resources. How are we going to direct them to that other country? How does it benefit us as a state, and how does it put us in the diplomatic world?
Okay, Kidi, Mwaga, your thoughts?
Thank you, Olive. I want to first start with the obvious, that we are part of course, the community of nations, and therefore we've got global commitments to fulfill. And therefore, leadership naturally emerges in times of crisis. And in times of crisis such as this, when a country like Haiti requires help, when Kenya steps forward to offer leadership, then I think that's a good thing. But then as that is happening, I am reminded of the words of John Beko when he says that history is more than the path left by the past. It influences the present and shapes the future. Because as we are looking at this, let us look at other missions that have taken place before. And of course, the most famous one is the Vietnam one, and how it panned out. My sister has mentioned Afghanistan, and you realize Afghanistan and Vietnam had the near similar trajectories. That one, there was massive loss of lives, and if you look at particularly Vietnam, is that there is still a feeling to date. This is something that happened in the 60s, but there is a feeling to date that there was a necessary loss of life, especially on the troops from the American side. So that even as Kenya is taking up this responsibility and going to Somalia, we must ask ourselves, do we really have to? As that is also happening, as we are grappling with that question, whether do we really have to, we must also remember that we still have a very poor police to civilian ratio, that even if you look at the figures provided by the UN, we are still not scoring very highly. If you look at the crime levels in the streets, they are still not very good. Still, ordinary mugging still are rampant, burglaries and such stuff. We are told that the northern frontier banditry is now under control. But we also, in the same vein and breath, must remember that Sondu has remained a flashpoint that we have not been able to deal with decisively. Of course, politicians have traded accusations, others saying that a certain section has hired people to wreak havoc, to get political credos. The question is, if certain people are known that they have hired goons to wreak havoc in a place like Sondu, why can't we see a decisive action by the security agencies? So while having faith in our law enforcement agencies, I still think that there is things we need to, and especially within the prism of Article 35, that the government still needs to do, ensure that there is a lot of sufficient information to the people, so that even as our law enforcement agencies are going to Haiti, they have support of the people. And that support can only come when the people know exactly what their sons and daughters are getting into. Thank you.
All right. So more or less, you're saying there needs to be some transparency. What are we getting into as Nudin? Nudin, umepata alai hapo. Another big announcement this week before I move us away from matters international. King and Queen, King Charles, Queen Camilla, going to visit Kenya between October 31st, which is what, a Tuesday to Friday, November 3rd. And at the invitation of President William Ruto, it's the first time the king is visiting a Commonwealth nation. But something stood out for me in the statement. Jim, His Majesty will take time during the visit to deepen his understanding of the wrongs suffered in this period by the people of Kenya. You welcome the visit?
Again, I think I started by saying, as a Pan-Africanist, and one of, sometimes we want to forget colonialism and colonization. Sometimes we want to not call it a crime against humanity. We don't want to call it what it is. We don't want to call it a hate crime. We don't want to call it invasion of territories without at least invitation of those countries. And not once has the United Kingdom, you know, apologized for the acts that he did on the African continent, at least in Kenya. Not once. We have several Mau Mau veterans who even sued the government, and I think they got some level of compensation, and that was happening. And now we want to be very cordial with the same people. Now, I say that bearing in mind that some of the top taxpayers in this country, companies, are British companies. And remember that Kenya was an imperial British East African company. We were a company of the Brits, and we were an extractive. And so the king is coming to check on his, to check out.
Oh, Jim.
Ban it.
Say it.
Jim
Ban
is
it. Ban it.
Is it the plantation?
Choma.
He's coming to check on the plantation.
Washa.
The
Size
others
all
have said
farm.
what I was about to say. And I think the problem is how we're trying to sanitize it and say that, you know, he's coming to deepen his understanding of the situation. He's coming to, he is doing his tour of duty, checking out, you know, the land, checking out what's going on here, and trying to bilateral relations. Do I welcome it? I think in where we are right now, it's whether we welcome it or not is a non-issue. But I think as a person of as an African, as a Pan-Africanist, I think there are serious questions that we need to have about colonization and the relationship that we have with this former colonizer, and what it speaks about neo-colonialism, and whether or not we are out of the yokes of colonization as a country, or we are still colonized but in a different way through debt trappings and things like that. So the king can come all he wants. He's welcome to State House, I guess. They can have a nice party there. He can go have the magical Kenya
experience.
and check out the Mara.
And the left.
Wanaenda Nairobi, ni Nairobi na Mombasa, from what I read.
Yeah, he can go even where the queen was when she became queen. You know, I hope they go to
Well, those
the
don't know
slopes,
itinerary,
to the
unless now
slopes.
that will be like.
Yeah, we hope he does all those things and then he can go back.
Okay, but Nurdin, are we being unfair? Because the statement reads that the visit will also acknowledge the more painful aspects of the UK and Kenya's shared history, including the emergency between 1952 and 1960.
You know, I forgot to say something. I hope he also goes and sees tigers on the side. You know, if he came last year, he would have found a song that wouldn't be pleasant. Semeni Dynasty Mbaya. Hasla Tawale. Sadly, Dynasty ni mzuri, red carpet. Anyway, that aside, you know, he rightfully said he's making a trip to check the plantation. Let me say it because I can't say it. I'll say it. The Sisal farm. Because at the end of the day, we have to be honest. We do celebrate Jamhuri Day and Madaraka Day. But we are not yet free. It's not yet Uhuru. There's a book called that. People should read that book. The sad reality is that the colonialists still control our politics, our economy, and our land. What is the reason for fighting for independence? Ask yourself, did we attain the goal? Do we still have IDPs? Yes. Do we still have land issues? Yes. Do we still have historical injustices that have never been sorted out here? We have reports like Ndungland report, the Kriegler report, all these reports that are in State House that have not been implemented, because if they're implemented, then they'll stuck some nerves. At the end of the day, we have to be very honest. As Africans, the sad reality is that we're not yet free. And the king is going to come whether we want it or not. I don't have a problem with it coming or not, because it doesn't change anything. We are told
I have a problem if it causes traffic snarl up, but keep going.
Oh, me too, but we still can't control that. At the end of the day, the issue we have, he said he's going to talk about the pains that we went through. You know, you can't compensate that. No matter how much people talk about forgive and forget. At the end of the day, we still have issues of, like there's one pressing issue. 70 years until now, Koitalera Rapsamoi's head is in London as a trophy. His family, the people from Nandi have always asked for that head. But it is seen more or less like since he rebelled for 11 years, it was a trophy. So you ask yourself, we are being told to heal and move on, but you're healing, hiding your wounds. So it's neither here nor there. We just wait to see. We're told he's going to meet youth leaders. So I hope those youth leaders are going to meet him. Akina Kidi, I think. Those who are going to meet him are going to be honest enough and discuss issues that are sensitive to the country. We're going to meet entrepreneurs and et al. So we wait to see what comes of the visit. I don't want to cast aspersions, but at the end of the day, I just know it's more or less like the normal visits that we see. They come, they go. He's more or less doing a tour.
Okay.
So let's just wait and see what happens.
Unasema ni safari?
Ni safari tu.
Okay.
Amekuja na one of the travel agencies tuko nazo. Jambo.
So it's Nairobi, Mombasa, and surrounding areas. So that can mean a lot, you know. But your thoughts? This is who better than him to come as we commemorate 60 years of independence?
Olive, I hope the king does not see this interview before he comes to Kenya. I hope he sees it after. But nevertheless, I think our first president did an excellent job at cutting ties or bringing up a new relationship between Kenya and the British. Because we have seen with our neighbors down in Southern Africa, with Zimbabwe and South Africa, and those countries are really grappling with issues to do with racism. Racism is something that we do not relate with as a country. We just read about it on books and watch it on TV. But countries in the South are really struggling with their former colonizers. And I don't think we are struggling with them as much as they are. And that I would give credit to the first president. So it's an honor for Kenya to be hosting the king and to be the first country he's visiting since he was coronated. And we have a very good relationship with the British. It does not have to be a bitter-sour relationship, but given our history, which is something that we must revere and I acknowledge. But moving forward, when we look at even our trading areas, we have about 43% of our exports going all the way to the UK, and even 9% of our cut flowers, which is something that we keep talking about every election in, year out. How do we support our farmers? They are the ones who buy our products. So things that we need to do are sort of improving our relationship with them. They could really support us in terms of value addition, that aspect that we talk about in agriculture. We want to improve the quality of the products we export. We want to support our farmers more. Those are the kinds of conversations I would want to hear, commitments made maybe between the British government and the Kenyan government on how we can even support farmers in our sector. Because one of the things that we are grappling with as a country is food insecurity. And on the papers, we've seen about the GMO conversation now coming up again. There's a lot we need to do in that sector, and they can be one of our best allies in doing this. The same way the US is asking us to support Haiti or otherwise, is the same way we can also get support from them in terms of boosting our agricultural sector. We need the technological infrastructure to do that, and currently we do not have that. When we look at capital goods that we need to improve value addition, we do not have that yet as a country. So we need that kind of support from them. We can call them big brothers now, even as we are moving forward, because when you talk about our leadership, democracy is all in our hands. When we have a finance bill, when we have constitutional reforms, when you're talking about reallocation, distribution of resources, when you talk about two-thirds gender rule, those are things that are within our mandate, and no one gets to interfere with all that. So when we look at the king coming to Kenya, we should look at it as an opportunity. I hope Kidi and the rest who are going to be representing youth leaders in that meeting will be able to say so, because as young people, I mean, there's so much we could benefit from this relationship that we have with the British. And moving forward, I mean, those are things that we should welcome and see how we can get the low-hanging fruits.
All right. So, Kidi, I'm looking at the clock and we need to get into the topic, but for your words, you know, how much of an impact can we expect his visit to have? I mean, are they not just ceremonial?
You just intelligently told me that I've got shorter time than my colleagues.
Yes. Are they not just ceremonial figures, right, in terms of the leadership structure in the UK? And then also what you make of, and you talked about Jomo Kenyatta, but there are those who would argue he was simply an extension of British rule, especially where land matters are concerned. And so what do you make of the agenda? They talk about acknowledging Wangari Maathai's contribution to conservation, technology. What am I forgetting? Tech, Wangari Maathai,
visit to the training where we have our army.
Yes, etc. Your thoughts?
Olive, besides the dark legacy of colonialism, I think that as a country, we must not live in the past. Because if we do, then we are akin to a young man who is married but still tells anyone who cares to listen that I am an orphan. An orphan, yet he is a father and with a wife already. So, but then of course, we must not downplay the role of the legacy of colonialism in this regard. That of course, colonialism served to desecrate our socio-political and economic institutions as they were before the coming of the colonialists. But then after the colonial adventure and Kenya emerged as a nation state, then we must then now strive to live within that system that we are now a nation state. As such, then we must seek that how do we then increasingly become more independent? How do we shed off the influence of the colonial masters in our social life, in our political life, and in our economic life? But then as we shed off their influence, how then again do we partner? How do we become partners in making sure that we unveil opportunity to the people of these two countries, the people of the UK and the people of Kenya? How do they engage in a relationship that is mutually beneficial? And I think to continue blaming in isolation the colonial legacy without taking responsibility would be a misdemeanor. Why would I call it a misdemeanor? Because in the words of William Shakespeare, that the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for taking some other time on that. Now, speaking of dynasties, on a light note, before Angel throws daggers my way. This was the Time for Leo headline on Monday. Kuna kitu kipya hapa. Ishara za urafiki baina ya Ruto na Raila Kalonzo zazua gumzo kuu. Wasingeonana uso kwa macho baada ya uchaguzi mkuu uliosababisha maandamano makali, ila kwa sasa viongozi wa Azimio wameanza kumchangamkia Rais Ruto huku wakimponda Gachagua. Je, kunani? If I was to look at it the other way around, Uhuru Kenyatta, as I stated, he was branded as the sponsor of protests, Mandamano, to undermine this administration. Lisemekana hiyo familia yao walikuwa hawalipi ushuru. Their land, there are those who threatened to go and pee. There were sheep that were seized. Yes. The DP had stated, if you're so interested about the fate of our freedom fighters, give them land. We're just referencing land right now. So what has changed? Je kunani G-Media?
I don't think he's ever been an enemy. Every 5-year cycle, we always need a boogeyman. We always need someone who can be the subject of our passions, hate, and love. Often it has been Raila Odinga who has been the boogeyman. So he's either highly loved or you hate him. But as he is getting to his sunset years and we see him transitioning politically, we try to get new boogeymen. And in the last election, Uhuru Kenyatta became the boogeyman. He became the man who people either really, really hated. There are people who voted against Uhuru Kenyatta and not necessarily against Raila, for Raila or William Ruto. But these 5 years, I think it is not sustainable because Uhuru Kenyatta has shown he's not interested in our small local politics. He's been there, done that. He's gone. And so there is emerging a new boogeyman, and that's Rigiji. And Rigiji is turning out to be the guy, the deputy president, who, if you can see, including from within the cabinet itself, you either hate Rigiji or you like Rigiji. And that's evolution. If you understand that every political cycle there needs to be a boogeyman, and that this boogeyman is created, we have to create one, and he's not an enemy of the political class. They are good friends. William Ruto narrated in Nyanza the other day how the people of Nyanza should be happy Because in 2007, ODM were looking for the presidency and they did not get it. And now in 2022, an ODM member has become president. So the people of Nyanza should be very happy because ODM is in government. That narrative that I am one of your own, I am a founding member of ODM. I was trying to make Baba the president, and that did not work out. So I tried to now become president myself, even though he did not support me. But clearly we are friends and we've been hanging around together. President Uhuru Kenyatta is, I think often we say that in African tradition, if your son is a thief, he's still your son. You never lynch him. You welcome them back home. You give them food. And the others can say they're thieves, but to us, he is our thief. If he's a thief, he's our thief. And so we welcome him back. You remember during the ICC cases, when everyone was saying the accused persons has done this and that, we said, if they have done those things, they are our sons. Bring them to us to deal with them at home and discipline them at home. Okay? And so what we are saying is, if Uhuru Kenyatta has done anything to anyone, Gachagua said he's our son, so bring him. We will discipline him at home. These are issues we will deal with at home. We will call a small meeting and discuss it, alternative dispute resolution. And we will talk about it, and he will give us mbuzi, we will choma, and that matter will be closed. They are never enemies. And as long as the public see the political community as an enterprise, and Willie Mutunga called us a bandit economy, there are few rich men and women have bundled together and found a way, a brilliant way of extracting from this economy at the expense of the majority of the millions. Former politician called us, we are a country of 10 millionaires and 10 million beggars. And so these few 10 people, and there could be more, there could be the 290 in parliament or the 47 in your Senate, they bundle together all the time. In terms of crisis, look at when one of them is bereaved or has an issue and how they all come together in decorum. There are no enemies in politics. There are only permanent interests in politics. And right now, interests are aligning. And when those interests are aligning, we forget the past and move on. Everyone is now re-strategizing about 2027. Sure. And so it is how much money, because of the influence of money in our politics, it is how much money can we collect. Everybody needs to collect as much money as possible between now and the next election cycle. Okay. So that when we get there, we can then do this thing again where we go to the people, psych them up, whip up emotions, tell them we hate each other, abuse each other on podiums, jump up and down, dance, get on wheelbarrows, make all funny kind of slogans, and then they vote for us or they vote against us, and then you get elected, and then you figure out how to make money again.
Okay. Nurdin, this was a standard headline and actually they've updated today's paper.
About time.
Facing Uhuru, headline a couple of days ago. After spending 5 years bashing his predecessor, the president and his deputy appear to have a change of mind and are heaping praises on a man they have loved to hate. What is afoot and why the change? What do you think is afoot?
This reminds me of a song by P Unit. Una jump, una ruka, una shida zinashuka. It tells you our political scene. And it's best explained by Linjiru in his book. He calls them political cousins. In that he says the dog, the jackal, the wolf belong to the same clan. Be careful when you're going for hunting with them because they might turn against you. Jim rightfully said that these people are not enemies. It's all about interest. And once everyone's interest has been catered for, case in point, Bomas, has been catered for, you have the president now in his tour in Nyanza saying, Baba siku hizi ni mtu wangu. Ameacha kuwa mganga, mchawi, tialala, mtu wa kitendawili. Sasa ni mtu wake. Because interests are aligned. And the sad reality is that we are set for 2027 campaigns. Remember, the former president, his last interview with the media, he said, William Ruto is my preso. If he calls me, I'll go there. I did it when I was president. I sought out Kibaki, Kibaki sought out Moi. So this was bound to happen. There are those who are saying between him and Ricky G, who will get Uhuru first. Believe you me, a call from Ruto and a call from Ricky G, obviously, you know where he's going to go at the end of the day. You see, and I don't think there's any war. It's just interests that are aligning. You see, the difference between the president currently and his deputy is that he has reached self-actualization. I'm a president. The deputy, if he has such intentions, he's not yet there. And that's why you see Uhuru and Ruto had a problem, because Uhuru had reached the top of the mountain. His deputy wasn't there yet. And so he could see any new dealings with the opposition, any new dealings with people who he sees as competitors, rubbed him the wrong way. And that is why Rigiji is saying, the president, aende Siaya afanye nini huko, mimi, I'm going to keep our base intact. That tells you it's more or less about campaigns and trying to position yourself as you're still needed. So we are going to see how interesting this thing shapes up. But at the end of the day, he rightfully said, the former president clearly doesn't have interest or keen interest in engaging in our political affairs, because I've heard the deputy president say that for the last 3 months, he has been quiet and involved in whatever has to do with politics. So at the end of the day, I believe it's not bad if they reach out and they talk, because at the end of the day, leaders need to talk with each other, not at each other. But the sad reality is that we are pawns, and these people meet up, they talk. It's never that serious. But the supporters take it in so passionately that you hate one another. But the political bourgeoisies will always sit on a table, the decision-making table, and ask themselves, oh, napita wapi, nipite wapi, nipite wapi. So long as the interests are aligned, you will never see any maandamano. You'll never see any antagonism, and you'll never see any reason for people to insult one another on platforms.
All right, so I know Kidi and Angel will not be too happy with me, but we do need to take a break. In not too long, you'll have your opportunity to contribute to this discussion. Facing Uhuru, Damascus moment is the question. What is afoot, and why the change of tune where he is concerned? Welcome back to AM Live. Jim India, political analyst, Nudin Hagai, advocate of the High Court, Angel Mudia, national chairperson, Jubilee Youth League, and we'll have convener, Interparties Youth Forum, Kidi Muaga. Angel, your party leader still?
Yes, my party leader, of course.
William Ruto quoted during the launch of MV Uhuru 2 in Kisumu. He said, I must congratulate my predecessor, President Uhuru Kenyatta, for his foresight in coming up with this Kisumu shipyard refurbishment. To see what we are seeing here is phenomenal. Who thought he got anything right in his 10 years in office? Rigathi Gachagua quoted as saying, the elections are over. It is time to gather and unite our people. We have agreed that no leader will pelt former President Uhuru Kenyatta with stones because he is still our son. Your thoughts?
My party leader. We've been through a lot.
With your party leader?
Yes. So I think there is a storm in the paradise of Kenya Kwanza. And the duo got to where it is because through lying to Kenyans, by calling people like us hustlers, by telling us
no, dynasties. You are dynasties.
Yeah, you're dynasty.
No, the youth were hustlers,
okay.
and that he will be fighting for hustlers, and that ataweka pesa mfukoni, na hii serikali itakuwa ya bottom up. We didn't know that taxes will be from the bottom up. And even using certain quarters like the church to push that agenda. Now today, even the church cannot speak in front of people convincingly because we are here where we are because of them. And then again, today I'm sad not to see my my comrade Mundalo and the likes of Kanini, who have been really pushing that agenda, being pushed by this same duo to bring down my party leader, but seemingly that has not worked because the cornerstone that was rejected is now the one being appreciated today. So when we look at our issues of today, even tomorrow, Olive, we have a date with EPRA again. And the president has realized that things are not working. We've seen the cost of living is not something you can just snap out your fingers. When they were standing on top of cars and declaring that hawa watu wanaongeza bei ya mafuta usiku na mchana, sasa wao ndio wanafanya the same exact thing. And they called my party leader a very retrogressive person by even having a handshake. But now today they have seen they cannot govern a country that is divided in the middle. So now they are reaching out to the party leader who is really who is garnering a lot of attention from the people of Mount Kenya especially. They are looking up to him to be the savior of this moment. They are looking up to him to be the one to speak out for them, because these things that are happening to us today, he foretold them. And that they are happening to them is something that they are really, really regretting. This is something that they should not have gone into in the first place, because he gave them an alternative, but they couldn't listen. But being the honorable man that my party leader is, he decided that he will hand over power amicably. He will not be like every other supposed African leader of refusing and staying in power, but do what he deems best for this country. And now that we are where we are, we can still come back as a nation and have these discussions, have a moment of reflection to see where exactly are we headed. Because our farmers are crying. The prices of milk, tea, and coffee have really not been the yields that they were expecting. When we look at the education system is now becoming something to talk about. When we look at political parties, they cannot speak on political and economic issues because of what they are doing at the office of the Registrar of Political Parties, ensuring that his party is not able to even convene anywhere because all the time they have is spent from one court to another, and even funneling millions of shillings from the party illegally. And now,
allegedly,
not allegedly, it is a matter in court. And Equity has been asked to produce bank statements of Jubilee, and those are things we should not condone. Are we going back to the dark days of Moi? Okay. Are we going back to the days where nobody can speak on the moral fabric of our society? That now the church has been pocketed, it now needs to go back and recleanse itself. Dividing the country into cultural and political units of, let's say, the Kikuyu Council of Elders is now being gagged by introducing another Council of Elders. And you're seeing pushes and shifts here and there just because we are not able to be honorable. And then now we want to say, oh, this guy we've been bashing, this guy we've been stealing goats from, we now want him to come back and face him.
But Kidimwaga, didn't the former president do the same thing with Raila Odinga? Raila, ulikuwa nasema aliitwa mganga, akaitwa alafu then again, Uhuru is not coming to tell us, this is the guy. Kidimwaga, what do you think of these developments? I just wanted to remind
my sister respectfully that his party leader is a beneficiary of the so-called dark days of Moi.
He's a son of Moi, actually.
But delving right into the heart of this conversation, Olive, there are two points I want to make. One is the economics of the argument. Secondly is the politics of the argument. The economics part is that...
Chill, let me take notes. One is economics and then number two is politics.
Politics. Yes.
Politics.
Yes.
Okay.
So let's start with the economic side of this argument.
Okay.
Is that this government rose to power on the platform of economic transformation. And now this is where there is a difference between campaign as a feel-good experience that you almost want to liken to a pop star experience, and the difficult mechanics of governance that I would want to liken to administering, penicillin to a very resistant syphilis, because now you have to make difficult choices. So then the government, the Kenya Kwanza administration, having campaigned on that platform, is that their base believed that that transformation was going to be instant. What their base failed to pay attention to is that all the leading economists in Kenya had painted a picture that Kenya was in economic doldrums, and it would take up to 5 to 6 years for the country to stabilize. And then now you remember that Uhuru was turned into a boogeyman, as my brother said, on account of the fact that because the economy was underperforming. So then this became a convenient political bait that then the so-called hustler had swallowed hook, line, and sinker. But then you realize a year down the line, the hustlers' fortunes has not changed. When their fortunes has not changed, and the government in very many quarters is getting increasingly unpopular, therefore there is a need to stem that and popularity before it blows out of hand. And now this brings us into the political side of this argument. That then, remember the question of the shareholders was because, you know, one thing that has happened with our politics is the question of ethnic supremacy. There are communities that have always felt that they've got, you know, they deserve a lion's share in government at all times. And so when that does not happen, of course they will rebel. But remember when Kibaki came in, he had to balance his civil service by rewarding his men. And he had to sack a lot of President Moi's men. Naturally, the Kalenjins felt threatened then. And part of the rebellion against Kibaki in 2007 in the Rift Valley was because it was deemed that Kibaki had removed our people from power. When President Ruto came in, and with their arrangement notwithstanding, naturally, that balance had to be achieved. In achieving that balance, clearly there is a cry from the central Kenya backyard that our people are this and that. I will give you an example. I remember there was a tiff at the Ministry of Water between the CS and the PS. When State House intervened, you could clearly see which side had lost the war, and both the battle and the war. So back to the question is that, Kunani, to answer your question, what is it that now has happened that both sides are now embracing the man they loved to hate? Someone observed that vice presidency is where ambitions go to die. But the only man who demystified that was President William Ruto. Because as a deputy president, he ensured in the first term that he got into the office of the deputy president with a political insurance. His political insurance was the MPs from his backyard who were loyal to him to a man. In the second term, what he did is that he extended the package of that political insurance by making sure that in President Kenyatta's backyard, over and above retaining his backyard, he had MPs who are doing his bidding. That is something that the deputy president may not have. If anything, he still has to contend with other kingpins within central Kenya. You know, Kiambu has a kingpin or potential kingpin, Murang'a has Ndindi, and other people. So the deputy president does not have a political insurance. And therefore, this brings me to answer the question, why Uhuru now? Central Kenya left unchecked, especially with the feeling that they're now becoming victims because of that balance that eventually has got to be achieved, is that they could easily rally around the deputy president. And that would give the deputy president both the political lifeline and the political insurance that he's lacking at the moment. And then that would force the president into a 50-50 kind of arrangement, akin to what President Kenyatta and President Ruto had in the first term. But then we acquire power to consolidate it, not to share it. So this is where Uhuru becomes a convenient tool. Why is he a convenient tool? Deputy President reaches out to Uhuru Kenyatta because if Uhuru Kenyatta throws his weight behind the Deputy President, then the entire Central Kenya region is going to be consolidated around the Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. And that is going to make him a political force that is difficult to ignore and difficult to call out, as you see has been called out in the past 1 week. But then, if the president is able to amend fences with the former president, it then therefore means that the president is therefore going to still continue having a subservient deputy who still, of course, does, in our first term MP who became deputy president, does not have a huge constituencies to speak about. So the deputy president will become easier to ignore. And therefore, it means that the president will therefore have a larger space to govern. Because I told you, governing requires difficult decisions. So when the president has got a deputy that does not give him a headache, because he has contained him politically, then the president would be able to make the difficult decisions he needs to make. And in my view, I think that may be a good thing for this country. Thank you.
Interesting. We'll come back to you and you'll explain why you think that.
Yes.
But Jim, India, why is Uhuru Kenyatta now relevant? Is it proof of a rift between the president and his second in command? Because there's the first Taifa Leo I had opened. Looks like I've closed it, but I will find it again. Is this about Rigathi Gachagua feeling threatened by these talks? right? These bipartisan talks, and forcing a handshake or some iteration of the same is now trying to consolidate his base. But he has not yet received the tap on the shoulder, as it were, from the community. Is that what you see playing out?
I think if Rigathi is threatened by the talks, then perhaps Uhuru is not the best person to talk to, because Uhuru is an agenda item in the talks. And I know the Jubilee Party might disagree, but when you have an agenda item called Leave Jubilee Alone in the talks, come on, who is Jubilee? That was a euphemism for Leave Uhuru Kenyatta Alone. And when you follow Maina Njenga and his men's conference that has been going around, his message has been very clear. Leave Uhuru Kenyatta alone. So President Uhuru Kenyatta is an agenda item in the talks. So if he's threatened by the talks, then perhaps don't talk to Uhuru Kenyatta. Nonetheless, I will allow my colleagues to delve into the political theatrics of Uhuru Kenyatta factor. And allow me to remind Kenyans who Uhuru Kenyatta is. Because we might suddenly forget, because we have such selective amnesia.
Mm-hmm.
In moments where it matters most, we choose to forget who people really are.
Mm-hmm.
We choose to forget what they have taken us through. And we choose to forget why we rejected them, or sometimes loved them in the first place. Uhuru Kenyatta is the president who has gotten us into the kind of debt we are in today. He is the man who presided over the economy that we are in today. A lot of the decisions, including the finance in 2018, a lot of the taxes that were increased in the 2018 finance bill started with Uhuru Kenyatta. He is the man who was able to decisively make parliament irrelevant by making them a laundering machine for the government through Aden Duale, the now Minister for Defense. Uhuru Kenyatta is also the same person who presided over, during his term, we had perhaps the highest number of extrajudicial killings. And we had all these special security forces that were formed to deal with security risks. But we know the number of Kenyans that were died extrajudicially. He's the man who refused to obey court orders and did not give a, do not care much about court orders, refused to swear in judges. That is, you can add other things to that legacy. But let me remind us that that is the man that we are talking about. This new president, William Ruto, who's come in, was his deputy. And now, for some weird reason, we are here talking about the relevance of Uhuru Kenyatta and forgetting that the new president has taken over anafuata nyayo za Uhuru Kenyatta. And he has decided to go along the same path. The economy, how much we are borrowing, how much we are spending, how much we are raising taxes, how many young people are unemployed at the moment, how, as my colleague said, the education sector is a mess, how the health sector is a mess. He is not any different. In fact, he wants so much to be like Uhuru Kenyatta. He tries so much, his very best to be like Uhuru Kenyatta, including forming special security forces, which he said were bad things, and forming special units within the security forces to do the same things that Uhuru Kenyatta was doing. Presiding over ethnicity. And we saw how during Kenyatta's time, there was ethnic majoritarianism from the Kikuyu community within government. And now we are seeing challenging majoritarianism within government. Same cloth. So let's not forget who these people are and the smoke screens that they try to divert us to and excite us about talking about the relevance of Uhuru Kenyatta and the relevance of Rigiji and see the issues for what they are. The moment we stop being enticed by small non-issues, like who's talking to who and who's sitting next to who and who's shaking hands with who, the moment those things stop to bother us, and we can look politicians in the face and say, I don't care who you're friends with. I don't even care who you drink with, or even who you sleep with. All I care about is that you do that which we elected you to do, service delivery to the people. If that is not happening, and we're able to do that with our MCAs very well at the mashinani level. That's why there's a high turnover of MCAs. You don't perform, you go home. But for some reason, there's a cast that we have at the presidency, where we hold the presidents in such high regard that we excuse them for things that we will not even forgive our own fathers and children for.
Okay. All right, Nudin, to reference recent events, Jim is painting a picture of Jada and Will. That you know that they may have been for the last 6 years, but they are not divorced.
Yes. You see, I said this, these people are political cousins, and they're taking care of their interests. Now, you have a scenario where some careers are being built, some others feel like their careers are threatened. Kidi rightfully said that you find a situation where in Mount Kenya, the last, I hate using this word, the last so-called kingpin was Uhuru Kenyatta. I hate that word because we're not subjects. And so they feel like there's a vacuum.
The real king is coming, don't worry.
Yo. So here's the thing. There's a vacuum, or rather they feel there's a vacuum. I don't know why there's this craze for one person to lead an entire populace like flock. Turn left, turn right. I don't know why. It's more or less like Beyonce to the left. Anyway, digressing. Let's go back to topic. So what I'm saying is that there's a vacuum, and they feel like I want to be the next quote-unquote leader of this community. And that's why you see, Rigiji, in as much as they were telling us that Uhuru Kenyatta, the dynasty in Mbaya, it's like he's on one knee waiting to be knighted. And he's calling for it. It's like, give it to me. And you find a scenario where there are those who are in cabinet who don't subscribe to him. There are those who are in parliament who don't subscribe to him as well.
Yes.
So he finds himself in a battle. And that's why he talks, when he speaks, he forgets that he's a deputy president of the Republic of Kenya. I know when he was being sworn in, he had challenges, but he should have understood that he was the deputy president for the entire...
He understood, but he says his assignment is Mount Kenya and
he had to take his oath a couple of times. Let me just finish. So the problem is that he forgets that he's the deputy president of the entire country and not Mount Kenya. Because in his... he speaks instead of communicating, and that puts him in a bad light. And it makes those who are anti-him package him perfectly not to endear himself to the people. So at the end of the day, he talked about the current president, Anafuata Nyayo. Are you surprised? A son to your father, your father's son. These are sons of Moi. So be it what we have seen, the signing of the privatization bill, which I have a problem with, telling us that now the executive can sell parastatals without input of parliament. Where does my say as a Kenyan through my representative come in? You just can't say non-performing. What is non-performing? Ordinarily, would be going for a referendum. But because that isn't viable, I have a rep who is meant to represent my views. So if we allow this to happen, no checks and balances, we have a dead parliament. You forgot to say that. It didn't come back. It's still dead. So you have an executive that is extra powerful. We have issues that we can't address as citizens because courtesy of the ducks that we have in parliament. They were called monkeys. The president said we have a parliament of baboons. I think they didn't get that joke. So at the end of the day, you have a scenario where, as a country, we are now given sideshows. Uhuru is coming back to do what?
Okay. All right. Angel, your response that you try as you might, you cannot sanitize Uhuru Kenyatta.
Yes, you can imagine I was burning at that. Because I think that the voice of people is the voice of God, and the people are really yearning to listen or to get further insights from my party leader on the state of the nation. And that cannot be taken away from him at this moment. He is the beacon of hope for most of his supporters across the country, not even just in Mount Kenya. Because he seemingly had a better idea of running this country. In just 10 years, I mean, look at the number of kilometers of road that we can count, even the electric connections that we have. Kenya is a giant in the continent and in the world because of his foreign policies that he really well, meaningfully entrenched during his tenure. And even supporting young people in a huge way. It is long since we saw young people in high levels of leadership, but it was him who demonstrated that. Now that the current president has realized, these things are not going as he anticipated they would, he's now trying to pick up ideals from the former president. But I'm saddened when my colleague talks about the debt situation in the country. And we know very well that in 9 months alone, the Star published that this Kenya Kwanza government has borrowed up to 1.2
But does that
trillion.
negate the debt we got into previously?
But he seemed to have a strategy, because there's nothing wrong with having a loan here and there, as long as you know how to service it better. If you have strategies that will be able to cover that, then that makes sense. But what we are seeing with this Kenya Kwanza government is that even as much as they have these kind of loans, they are not having that revenue collection as they would deem fit. Instead, they are taxing people so that they can fix this. But that's not working, because what do we do when we tax people more? We cannot tax ourselves into development. So when my colleague here paints this great statesman like that, I sought to differ vehemently, because even one of the submissions that were made by the leaders at the bipartisan talks was that there was too much police brutality during the mandamonos. And whom did we lose? There were young people. And we had the Nation publishing that Uhuru said that he did not want his relation, he cut ties with the current president, or as the deputy president, because he wanted the president to deal with the opposition ruthlessly, but he didn't like that. So he cut ties with him. So what happens now? Ruto is the man on the seat. What happens to that? What the president is trying, what Ruto is trying to do is not to become the Trump kind of president that he has seen himself to be. He's cutting down ties with his former predecessors, and he's seeing that he's losing ground over and over time. So now that he's reaching out back, it seems he just does not want to become like Trump and become a one-time president, right, which I think he seemingly is following that path.
Your last word, Kidimwaga, on this subject.
My sister Angela Mbudia comes from a place where people they don't like they call kagege.
Mm-hmm.
And because it seems that central Kenya is full of, I don't know if when they're called tugeges. Yeah. One thing that is going to happen, and that is why for me I think that there needs to be a rapprochement between the president and the former president, is that former president has scheduled what they call Thanksgiving rallies later in the year. And one thing that may likely spiral into is that because of the difficult economic situation, in large part because of the environment that the government inherited, and subsequently the taxes they have had to put in place. Well, the net effect of these taxes is that it has undermined the Kenya Kwanza's golden project called the Hustler Fund. Because Hustler Fund was giving young people about 800, 1,000 shillings, 2,000, Bob. This was supposed to be a revolving fund helping young people do small businesses. But that 1,000 shillings has greatly lost its purchasing power on account of the taxes. So then there is going to be an economic blowback that may foment before the 5 years lapses. And because of how the Kenya Kwanza administration has treated the President Kenyatta before, with his Thanksgiving rallies, that may consolidate the central Kenya solidly against the administration, especially if you look it through the prism of Maina Njenga's men's conference or whatever it is. So that if that happens, then areas that have not entirely been pro-Kenya Kwanza government may now be easily be wooed into joining that rebellion. And therefore, you realize that this is where I think, and I am praying that President Kenyatta, if he has to choose which side to forgive, then let him forgive his former deputy.
Right. In
the interest of the country. Okay. Because that way, the government may have an opportunity to firmly deal with our governance issues. There is a question that there could be having a lot of influence of the Bretton institutions at the Treasury. Mm. That may happen, that may be true because of the political surrounding that the president finds himself in. So that when he has got a greater political breathing space at home, then I think, in my view, because he would be able to make the hard decisions. But if that does not happen, naturally as a human being, he may be inclined towards self-preservation. And that self-preservation may not work best in the best interest of the country. Mm. So, in a nutshell, President Uhuru Kenyatta right now remains the one person who can make or break the Kenya Kwanza administration. Thank you.
Wow, that's a loaded statement. But I have to bring the conversation to a close at this point. Tuingie mambo ya weekend with Sherehe Sheria. We have had in studio Kiri Mwaga, convener Inter-Parties Youth Forum. He's gotten the short end of the stick this morning. I must apologize.
You've got to make it up to me.
Next time, come early so you should where Jim is sitting. Angel Mbudia, National Youth Chairperson, Jubilee Party. And we've also had in studio Advocate of the High Court, Certified Public Mediator, Nudin Hagai, and political analyst Jim India. Thank you so very much for being here. I've been your host, Olive Burrows. See you tomorrow.